Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. With President Trump and his delegation in Beijing right now, what does success look like for the president with one of the U.S.'s largest trading partners as well as greatest military threats? For analysis, we're pleased to welcome our panel, David Zhang, host of David on China, where he presents insider analysis on YouTube, as well as presenter of the new documentary, China's Stealth Invasion, and Rod D. Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital and member of the Committee on the Present Danger of China. David, let's start with you. So much to discuss. How are you assessing President Trump's visit and how he could be successful?
Right. Now that we have the slight summarized readout from both sides, the Chinese side really emphasized the Taiwan question. Obviously, they already made a lot of these red lines available before the meeting even took place. And then the White House put out a short statement saying that essentially there was discussions on trade, discussions on buying oil, American investment, Chinese investments, and American talks of financial incentives, and as well as I think a very important one, the Iran question as well. But I think it seems to me like both sides were kind of not talking on the same level to a certain degree, where the key component of what they wanted to emphasize, Xi wanted to talk about the Taiwan, wanted to maybe get something out of the president. And then President Trump was obviously there to make talks on tariffs and trade, as well as fentanyl was another big one as well. So I still think that the Chinese side came out with this new statement, this phrase called strategic constructive stability, or something along those lines, which I found was just interesting because it sounds to me like they're simply saying that we need to have some time to kind of rest and to stop fighting. We need time because China's economy is obviously not doing too well, and they need the American help. And so I think this is Xi's version of let's sort of buy some time and recuperate in the meantimes.
Very interesting, sort of a wait and see model, and not further escalate. Let's de-escalate and try to work together. Rod, same question to you. What does success look like for President Trump, and what is she looking for?
Well, the president absolutely wants to establish proper trade relations, and that was always the goal with the tariffs. That may sound counterintuitive, but it really isn't. The United States basically gave away the store to the communist Chinese for decades. Absolutely absurd. Some of the things that in particular the Clinton and to a lesser degree the Bush administrations did to facilitate China's rise. And that lopsided trade architecture is visible in our trade relationships all over the world. So the idea of the tariffs a year ago was simply to establish some degree of reciprocity, get things on an even playing field, make sure that we aren't just draining all of our jobs to China or Mexico or Vietnam or wherever, and actually trade, actually on fair terms trade. And I think we've established a lot of that balance now. I think that's certainly true in other parts of the world. We've made good progress in China. And the president wants a good trading relationship with China for this reason, if none other. Now, forget rare earths, forget oil, forget all of those considerations. The truth is, a China that is more embedded in the United States and vice versa from a trading perspective, particularly on energy, is a China that is more constrained in attacking Taiwan. And that's what our arms deals have been aimed at. That's why the Japanese are now selling a bunch of frigates to the Australians. That's why we have a new defense deal with Indonesia. That's why we have a new trade deal with India. That's why we have a nuclear submarine deal with South Korea. That's why we're selling howitzers and HIMARS to Taiwan itself. We want to make the cost of the steel more expensive than it's worth. We want to raise the risks to Xi crossing the strait so much that he just isn't willing to try. And that is facilitated by better trade.
Yeah, better trade makes for a zero-sum game for him, and it makes it not worth his while to saber rattle in that respect. Very interesting way to break it down. I do want to shift now, David. Let's talk about human rights. Can the president make any progress on this?
Right. There was no mention officially on this. I'm sure in private, this was a conversation that was raised. Look, I discussed this yesterday, and I said that the president went in with a lot of cards in his hands. As much as the Chinese shell army out there on the propaganda side is trying to make it seem like the president went to China to ask for things, Xi is the one
I'm Rod Martin. The most important long-term issue in America isn't inflation, elections, or even foreign policy. It's education right here at home. If you follow my daily geopolitical analysis, you know American culture is at a crossroads. The future of our nation will be shaped by what we teach the next generation. One of the most important investments we can make in America's future is the education of our children. Strong families, strong communities, and strong nations are built by raising young people who understand the truth, think critically, and are grounded in faith and virtue. That's why I'm proud to support the Herzog Foundation. They are working to make Christian education stronger, more accessible, and more available to families across the country by training administrators, launching new schools, honoring teachers, and even providing student scholarships. If we want to preserve the values that made America great, we need to invest where it matters most, our children. Join me in supporting this mission. Visit herzogfoundation.com today and click donate. That's herzogfoundation.com.
That really needed help on this. So I think he had to listen to the president on discussing some of the key human rights violations that China commits. But look, remember, the CCP's fundamental survival is based on two identities today. One is their nationalism, the need to raise people to be angry about Japan, to be angry about Taiwan, to be angry about the United States and its people. And the other one is the fact that many CCP officials have blood on their hands, and that they're bonded together by this sort of survival state of we've all done bad things, terrible things, and we must keep together to survive and to move forward. So I think that's essentially a survival for the CCP. So on the human rights front, I'm sure there were discussions on this, and I'm sure there's going to be continued discussions on some of the key names, for example, Jimmy Lai, Ezra Jin, and particular groups like Falun Gong, Uyghurs as well. I do think that's an important conversation. I'm not so sure if the CCP really wanted to hear all of that through the meeting, because it was a short meeting. It was 2.5 hours. And I think they wanted to talk about other things much more, trying to evade those human rights questions.
Yeah, it seems like that might be the case, as you point out. Just a 2.5-hour meeting and a lot of trade. Certainly the Iran war took up a bunch of time. Rod, to pivot to you on that, human rights abuses do affect Americans in many ways, including forced labor in the global supply chains, making competition impossible on some products. And the same, of course, goes for currency manipulation with China. So does China, when they entered the World Trade Organization during the Clinton era, critics argue that the conditions have worsened, not improved, though that was the actual price of entry to get into the World Trade Organization. We're 25 years later. So the CCP, as David points out, largely avoids public accountability through saying we'll talk about it privately, but we can never have it be in the readout, et cetera. So how does Trump move that forward, since on Capitol Hill and just Americans are really calling for movement on human rights, especially when you talk about things like organ harvesting?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, things are not worse compared to the Cultural Revolution, but they are massively worse compared to most of the 1990s. And it's just absurd what we've seen happen. It is unconscionable that the world could stand by and watch the genocide taking place in Xinjiang. It's just absolutely unacceptable. And at the same time, it's not that easy to get China to budge in this. They're a huge power, and it's not like we're going to invade. So what can the president do? Well, he can link it to things they care about. He's got a limited range of ability to do that because China holds a near monopoly on rare earths refining, and we're still dependent on that, at least for the next few years, while we start ramping up our own refining capacity and allied refining capacity. But we have levers on that too. Our absolute control of the choke points through which Chinese trade, and particularly energy, flows absolutely help us to even that playing field, so that the president has room to talk about some things like the Uyghurs. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at that, it is affecting their ability to trade with the rest of the world lots of companies, lots of individual countries are unwilling to do business with any part of the Chinese economy that touches on that. And so I think the president has a decent chance of making progress there. And the one last thing I'd say on that is that the president has actually made human rights a centerpiece of his dealings with lots of countries where it seemed intractable. For instance, the release of a pastor in Turkey, which just looked impossible. It's just all talk. Nothing's going to happen. Trump got him released. And we've seen that again and again. So I think there's a decent chance the president could make some progress here, but it's definitely tough.
Yeah. And David, as Rod mentions, the economic lever is the best chance to be able to persuade difficult countries into doing the right thing. And there we are. Sorry, I thought we lost you there for a moment, David. So I want to talk about the economic levers. What is the president hoping to gain? What is she looking to gain? Can they both win if we work together when it comes to the economic part?
Yeah, I was asked about this, and I had this feeling where I thought, why bring all the CEOs and the business leaders to China? And I was having this discussion with another China expert privately, and I think the idea is that I think Trump went in knowing that Xi is going to bring him a lot of incentives, wanting him to say, hey, look, let's change some language on Taiwan, let's change some languages on our relations. Let's make sure. And also, you got to remember, Xi has a domestic power problem, where he's also having inter-party, power struggles, and his own stability is also there of a question. So he needs the maximum amount of support from the president. That's his view. And so when we're talking about the economic incentives, we could see a lot of actual deals. I'm not going to say actual purchases because again, the CCP, you cannot trust them to fulfill their promises. They didn't do so with the phase one trade deal. They might not do so with what they promised President Trump this trip. But the point is, is going to seem like he wants to buy all of the oil in the world from the United States, all of the soybeans, all of the semiconductor chips, all of the H-200s, and whatever else that it requires to please the President Trump into, walking away feeling like that the president got a deal done. So I think enforcement is a big key factor here. And don't give up too much in exchange for an empty promise from the Chinese Communist Party. And I think that's the key lesson for people to understand is we're not dealing with a regular government. But like Rod mentioned, there's a sense of accountability that the president is trying to put on the table, saying, let's trade fairly. Let's trade in an equal place where you're not going to continue to steal American technology at the same time as American investments are going to China. And so I think nowadays there's a lot more leverage in terms of the tariffs, the secondary sanctions and whatnot. But also I think it's just the U.S. government is more cautious than ever before, just based on how many things have happened over the past few years.
Yeah, it's a great point to end on. Just because you sign the deal and make the deal, with this regime, you also have to hold them accountable to enforcing the deal. David Zhang, host of David on China on YouTube, and Rod D. Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital. Thank you so much to both of you for joining this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.